Hello and welcome to the HealthTech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Trinas, CEO of Health Launchpad. So Health Launchpad is my company. We are a pipeline development company, a marketing company in the healthcare technology space. We help companies grow their pipelines and improve their messaging and things like that. And we're presenting this podcast in partnership with the wonderful folks from HIMSS who have been long-time supporters of this podcast, and we're very grateful to them for that. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you in particular if you're a subscriber. And if this is your first time listening, why don't you subscribe now? Just click the subscribe button on your podcast app or on your, if you're watching the video on the YouTube video button down below. Just click subscribe. That way you won't miss all the other great episodes that we've got coming out. But I'm going to have a hard time competing with this one. I am really excited about this episode. Today, we're talking about one of the subjects I'm a little bit obsessed about, and that's account-based marketing, aka ABM. I've been involved. I guess I've been doing ABM for the best part of 10, 15 years half of that without really realizing it, but really doing it in earnest in the last 5 or 6 years. So why is ABM important? We're going to go into that in depth in this session, but I know that it is one of the top issues that marketers are thinking about, particularly in health tech marketing. We survey a network of health tech marketing leaders we're involved with called the HealthTech Marketing Network. There are about 200 members, and ABM always comes up as one of the most important topics. And we recently completed a survey on ABM. And the thing that was interesting was that about 40% of the people we surveyed said that they have not started, but they're actively considering it. And most of the rest have started their journey. Very few actually have been doing it for more than 2 or 3 years. So the majority of what was left, maybe another 40%, I think it was there or thereabouts, are either in year one, they're either piloting it or they're in year 1 or 2 of doing ABM. But there's still a lot of people sitting on the touchline. And the thing that was particularly interesting to me was that this was the second time we'd actually asked this group. We did it again last year, and it was still about 40%. And so I think it means that there's still a lot of people out there who feel that they should be doing ABM, but aren't really, still having a big issue overcoming that inertia, jumping over that hurdle to get started with ABM. And believe me, we get it. It's not easy. This is not like switching on paid search or something like this. This is a big undertaking. And so today's episode is designed for, if you're thinking about ABM but not sure about it, it's going to paint a picture of what that journey looks like. And so Erik, I'm going to introduce in a minute, is actually going to talk about the early part of that journey, the first couple of years. So you'll have a real clear sense of what your life's going to be like once you start doing ABM, and hopefully they'll kind of overcome some of the sort of the risks that you think, and help you overcome some of the fears that you might have about it. And then the second person who's here, Kelly McDermott, who's been on the podcast several times actually now. I think you might be a 3-peat or a 4-peat. I'm not sure. And Erik's actually been on twice before too. Once before. Kelly's going to be talking about what ABM looks like when you've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. Kelly is one of the few ABM veterans in our community. And so she'll give a real sense of what that looks like. So if you're listening to this and you say, well, I've been doing ABM for a year or two, why would I listen to it? It's like, you want to listen to what Kelly has to say in particular. You're also going to hear some different perspectives from Erik on the way that he's been approaching it as well. So with that, Erik and Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself. Erik first and then Kelly.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Happy to be back on your podcast. So appreciate the opportunity. I'm Erik Johnson. I'm the VP of Marketing at Harmony Healthcare IT. We focus in on data archiving, data migration. So we are selling into primarily hospitals, health systems, and acute care outpatient practices and facilities. Essentially, what we do is anytime somebody needs to consolidate their data footprint and put it into archive, that's where we come in. So thanks again for having me on the podcast this week.
Glad to have you back.
And I'm very delighted to be here again with you as well, Adam. I'm Kelly McDermott, the Chief Marketing Officer for Caregility. We're a telehealth technology provider, and the Caregility Cloud is our platform. And we support telehealth, everything from virtual nursing to specialty consults. We're in about 1,100 hospitals nationwide and support over 6 million sessions a year.
Well, it's great to have you both back on the show. I'm going to start off by asking you a really unfair question, which is, if you were, here's the question: why not do ABM? Why would you not want to do it, given the businesses that you're in? Why don't we do Erik first, then Kelly?
I mean, it's a fair question, right? Because we certainly as marketing leaders are faced with lots of challenges in terms of how to help our business grow, right? And sometimes it's easier to point to some of the constraints as to that drive your priorities, right? And the thing for me about ABM is that I think that rather than thinking about it from a standpoint of why I shouldn't do it, is a lot more about thinking about it in terms of the components that I could be doing, right? That ultimately should be doing, that sometimes we get wrapped up in this idea that, well, if I can't tackle an account-based marketing program from end to end, then therefore I'm not doing it. And so therefore I can't get started. And so therefore I won't go advocate for budget. I won't go looking for better tools. And then it's just sort of spiraling on. And then you just resort back to what you're doing on a day-to-day. And as opposed to considering the journey and taking steps that are absolutely part of standing up an ABM program. And I think it's reality of it is the lens that needs to be taken into consideration is something that is a timeline that's going to take a while to implement, right? So you are tackling components of a process that typically are more sophisticated, require really digging in and understanding, various parts of your buyer journey and how to apply each, area. So that can be a little overwhelming. And so my answer is a lot less about why not, and a lot more about what you should and can do that is still ABM work, right?
Right.
And not getting so wrapped around the axle of
So it's
the definition of something, so it becomes a non-starter.
So if you can't do full ABM, at least practice ABM thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Kelly?
Well, I would agree with Erik that you need to have a good foundation before you can build on it with ABM. So absolutely in that regard. If you don't have buy-in from the top down as to this is a good strategy and alignment with your CRO, for example, it doesn't make sense, because it does take full collaboration and integration with the various departments. You don't want to have to constantly be defending yourself as to why you're doing this. And it doesn't, show up one day and it's like the next day it's all, working. You've got to, it's a constant iteration. So you need that long-term vision and support. So if you don't have that, I don't think
you don't have buy-in. You don't have buy-in. You're going to. I completely agree. I mean, I think in our work that we do with clients, there have been some instances a few years ago when we were kind of really pushing some of their clients to do it.
Yeah.
And, some of the marketing folks are sort of pretty courageous about doing it, but obviously it hadn't got full buy-in from sales. And we just really struggled. And it in the end, I think, they sort of bimbled along, and then we just, all right, let's just put a pause on it because it's just not working. Okay. So all right, but you both made the decision to move ahead with ABM. So Kelly, I mean, you tell us your ABM story. I mean, why was it you decided several years ago now to stick your neck out and said, we're doing it?
Well, we launched in September of 2019. And at that time, Ron, our CEO, said, okay, if money were no object, the thing every marketer ever wants to hear, right? If money were no object, what would you do from a marketing perspective? And I thought, well, after all the basics, I think what I would do is I'd buy a bus and I would totally outfit it with all of our technology and equipment. And we would drive the bus all over the country and we'd get them out, because healthcare providers, they're so busy, and we'd be right there for them. Well, then COVID hit, and the idea of putting a whole bunch of people in a small bus kind of flew out the window. It wasn't really a good idea at all. And then when we came out of the pandemic and had a time to assess, it was at that point I was like, okay, who's my target audience? What am I going to do? And the more I thought about ABM, the more it made sense, because we had such a finite audience, which is one of the very helpful criteria, for looking at ABM. So it was then when I started saying, okay, well, let's see how we're going to pull this together and execute.
So you did ABM because you couldn't buy a bus.
Right. Yes. And my argument to the CEO was when I stated my case, I said, it is cheaper than a bus.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. There you go. I think that works for me. Erik, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our journey in 2024 with the task of continuing to try to connect with our buyers just early on in the sales cycle, right? Which I think is every marketer's focus. We were really tasked with, though, doing some things differently that required us to look at a lot of our different processes. And the good thing is that we've had some really good go-to-market processes in place, but not necessarily the tech stack, if you will, that represented, sort of more of a modern marketing tech stack. And so relying on the processes that worked in terms of how we generate inbound leads, how we and work on our outbound, I always come back to this notion of really trying to focus in on the buyer journey and trying to bring a lens back internally that goes back to a demand-based slide that I really like to talk about, where there's two sides of the buyer journey, right? And on the one side, it's the part where buyers are consuming information all the time, right? And we'd like to think that process is linear. And especially as sales and marketing people, it's a process that we want to control, right? And we want to predict and control this linear line of thinking that is trying to, systematically march a prospect down a pathway to get them to do what we want, right? Fact of the matter is that pathway looks like a bowl of spaghetti, and making sure that internally that we understand that and can be leaning in and presenting information to help educate those folks that are consuming content in a nonlinear fashion and try to bring that into as part of our process, to me, is the ultimate journey that we're all on, right?
Yeah.
If we have it our way, we want to control it all. But the fact of the matter is that's not the way people consume their information.
No control over anything.
We're going to drive that process. So how can we be a part of it? How can we recognize it, be a part of it, and then do it in such a way that is methodical and systematic, that can be repeated, right? And so that really presented our opportunity and how to get going, and more of a philosophy that I think represents so much of what's happening in the space today, that where modern tools and understandings and insights come together, that we can be a part of that bowl of spaghetti more often than ever, right? But nonetheless, it's a process that's non-linear, and when we're functioning in more of a linear kind of world.
I like that notion that, it's unrealistic to think that as a marketer or as a sales, an organization selling to any organization, large organization, that you can control the way that they buy You have to earn the right to be part of that process. I think that's a very good way of thinking about it. So Erik, carry on and tell us about the journey. So you set the table about, with the spaghetti on it, about why you decided to go ahead with ABM. So tell us about that first year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we set out with really 4 specific goals with our project. Number one, of course, got to generate more opportunities, right? I mean, anything that we're going to do has got to result in the ability to find more opportunities, convert those to the pipeline, increase awareness and education. I think, to me, this is the part that isn't emphasized enough, right? Which is, we need to focus in on accounts that we're trying to make them aware of us and push them in a direction. But it does start with them getting awareness, and that typically falls into that bowl of spaghetti where we don't know who's aware, but today's tools can help us better understand that more than ever. So how do we make them aware first, and then know it, and then begin to move them in a path? We especially wanted to make sure that we were creating well-orchestrated coordination between marketing and sales. I think Kelly hit it right from the outset, is that if we don't have alignment to start with on just simply the accounts that we're focused in on, where we're going to win together, then we need to get there first and start with these lists of accounts where we're both actually trying to work coordinated processes. And then lastly, we actually have SDRs that report into the marketing function. And so we have the opportunity as part of this to leverage that capacity with our SDR team, so that as accounts move down a journey, that we can engage those SDRs in a way that really helps continue to have them provide meaningful touch points in that journey. So those are the goals that we set out really to start off our project with.
One thing I would comment on what you said too, Erik, is I think there's a component of patience that sometimes gets overlooked. You mentioned the SDRs, and the spaghetti, and we do want to control everything around that spaghetti. Wouldn't that be great? At the same time, there's a period where marketing is doing their job within ABM, and you need to have alignment with your sales, counterparts that, no, it's not time to call yet. No, you can't jump in yet. You have to trust us. You have to be patient and let us do this, follow this process a little bit before you can reach out to them. So there's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, and we experience that as well too, which is there's some nuance to this, right? Which is the nuance of making sure that we're presenting information to the sales organization about, hey, there's something happening here with this account. We can see it. We are moving them from a point of unaware to aware, and a point of aware to engaged, and so on and so forth. But if I'm the sales organization, I'm of course going to say, well, what does that mean for me? Can I call them, right? Should I take action on that? And that's a hard thing, right? Because we want to show progress, but it's not progress necessarily in the same sense yet of really saying, hey, is it ready for them to be contacted by you? Not yet. However, right, we're moving them down a path as prescriptively as we can, and the time will come.
So Erik, paint a picture for anyone out there, for you a year ago, which is, if I, a year from now, here's what I would here's what I can expect to see in terms of outcomes. Whether that's results, whether that's visibility, measurement, whatever it happens to be, like, what do those outcomes look like? And then what was it you actually did as a team to get that? What was the sort of, what did the program look like?
Yeah. I mean, if you fast forward, you can certainly expect to, as we did, to be able to measure progress of a specific set of accounts and see them move down a path, right? And so if you're starting with a certain set of X number of, let's just say, several hundred target accounts agreed upon with your sales team, that these are the accounts that we're going to work together, right? And the notion is that over time, we're going to move them down this path, starting from unaware to aware, ultimately to some of those are going to hopefully and will turn into opportunities, right? So that's the way that we're going to measure it. You're going to have the opportunity to communicate that progress to your stakeholders within the organization at a different level, right? And so, to me, all of a sudden, that talk track becomes much more strategic. It becomes much more different in terms of how we're trying to drive a group of accounts that are really important to the business in a way of engaging that probably the marketing team hasn't articulated before, right? And then because of that, you'll be able to organize that communication differently, right? And that's how you start the conversation. And then the rest of the tactics will fall under what is happening to help that occur. I think the one thing to keep in mind, right, is that throughout that journey, as much as we want to find that there's a lever that was specific to something that happened, it might always not be the case, right? So what we're going to see is we're going to see progress, but the result is from a number of different types of tactics, right? And so getting accounts to sophisticated buyers to move in a direction is going to require a lot of different orchestrations coordinated in such a way that you can stand back and say, well, it was pretty clear it wasn't any necessarily one thing. It was all of these tactics that actually got that account across the line. And do we see a pattern, of course, as a result of that? And to me, that's ultimately what we're trying to chase, is this level of predictability, which is still part of our journey right now. And we're still part of that process of really trying to be predictable in that way as we're seeing some of the early results.
So predictability is probably the key benefit, the key thing that you're learning. But the other thing is, once you start to see certain set of, X percentage, X number of the accounts that are in your ICP, your target list, emerge as engaging, it's then, what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that you're then adapting your tactics to get them, keep them moving. Were there any tactics that you tried that didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, some of the advertising tactics definitely didn't. The one in particular is content syndication and advertising syndication. We tried it. It's just fairly noisy. I'm glad we did it. And we even took steps, which really you're not supposed to, in terms of reaching out to those folks, even on ad engagements, only to find out that, of course, that they really weren't interested in connecting that way. So, but I think this is definitely the time to be trying a number of different tactics and cross them off the list, right? And really honing in on what specifically is making your buying audience want to lean in, and finding that set and then doubling down on those particular tactics, right? Where are you finding engagement? What type of content are you creating as a result of that? And dropping a lot of different lines in the water to ensure that we can see what's resonating, and then use that to guide the journey from there, right? And I would say, more than anything, that's where the inertia, that's where the steep hill starts, right? You just got to start getting off the ground and getting that rolling. And then you can actually start to see some progress, and then measure the effectiveness, and then tack from there.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So, Kelly, what does ABM look like when you've been doing it for a few years?
Well, I'd love to, it's all nirvana. That's what it is. Everything is beautiful. I wish. Actually, it's really interesting to be able to start overlaying all of the data insights that you're able to capture with ABM, as well as other tools. We all have a tech stack now, right? And I was able to do, for example, an exercise where I overlaid the journey, the entire purchasing journey of one account that came to us, in through a marketing effort, through the entire thing to when it closed. And it took about a year and a half for it to close. But I was also able to show here is like it was just one person, then it was three, then it was five, and at the end it was 17 people, further validating that it is a buying committee now, and who all those people were within the buying decision. And having that, and then also within that, here are the different activities. Here they went to this webinar, they went to this event, they did this. So it isn't one single activity that drives a sale, and that helps me with attribution, right? To say, oh, it is a mix of these different things, and giving up any one doesn't make sense necessarily if you're looking at it very holistically. So it's been really good to be able to have that kind of information available, and then begin to understand the sales cycle. Because in the beginning, launch a telehealth company 6 months before a global pandemic. We were busy, needless to say. And so we had a false sales cycle as a result. Everybody was rushing to us. After we came out of the pandemic, we had another false sales cycle of a much longer one because, of course, there was no money. So they had to recover. So now we're starting to gain insight into, as of last year. And so, okay, this is really the realistic sales cycle for us. Then how can we affect that from a marketing perspective to shorten and, that cycle as much as possible, and tighten up, the activities within that. So that's really been helpful. The other thing too is if I can show, with the investments that we've made and have top of funnel all the way down to the close, then the CEO comes to me and says, well, I think next year we're going to, make our number X. We're going to raise it by X. I'm able to say, okay, if you want to hit that number, I can work it backwards. I can show you the reports. This is what my marketing budget needs to be in order to accomplish that. And you've got a lot more credibility having that conversation with the CEO and the board because you've got the data and the metrics to prove it. But that goes back to having buy-in from your C-suite, and that this is the way to go, and that they know it's a marathon, not a sprint. We're going to, year over year, it'll be an iterative process. We'll improve it every year. We'll do good things. We'll do things that weren't so great, but you'll be getting more and more information quarter over quarter as we move forward. So that's kind of where we're at now. And it's a nice place to be, but it still takes time.
One of the things that I heard from you, I think the last time we talked about it, was that when it came to ABM, that in the first year or so, it was much more focused on new logo acquisition.
Absolutely.
But in the last couple of years, maybe you've sort of expanded that to be also more about marketing to existing customers.
Yes. As there's been growth and adoption in telehealth to a much broader group of, many more workflows within the healthcare system. Virtual nursing, of course, has exploded. And, where do the workflows fit in there? And then, with technology, it doesn't matter what technology you're in. What I always say is you could walk on water and somebody's going to say, well, that's really good, but could you do it on your hands? So it's the same with the hospital systems. They get introduced to telehealth and all it brings, and then they start thinking, well, I could do it for this, I could do it for that. And so having those conversations and then watching their, within ABM, what are they searching on? Where are they going? What are they interested in? Helps inform us where we need to be going as well.
Yeah. So I think the clear picture which comes from both of you is that if ABM is valuable for one thing, it's about predictability and being able to report, with facts and data to your management about, here are the accounts that seem to be moving in our direction. This is what we're doing to move them. This is what the impact is of it. And, this is what we would expect to happen. I remember when I ran a software company that one of the hardest lessons I had in dealing with the board is don't ever say, we hope this is going to happen, because that you get slapped around pretty quickly on that. We expect the following.
Yes.
And that is always incredibly hard to do for a marketing person, because there's so much that's out of your control, particularly when you have sales cycles that last more than a year with 5 or 6 people involved with it, et cetera, et cetera.
I would add to that analytics as well, predictability and predictive analytics, but having that data, that historical data that just sort of proves, your theories.
So I want to double click on something that you both referred to, which is attribution. So, attribution is always a really contentious issue in marketing. How do you think how has ABM and doing ABM affected your thinking about it? Erik, you want to take that first?
Yeah. I guess, I try not to get too bogged down on the who gets credit kind of notion, right? On the opportunity, as much as standing back and looking at, are we doing all the right things as a sales and marketing organization at the end of the day to make sure that we are trying to connect with this prospect in their buying journey, right? And so to me, then, it might be more apparent on what we aren't doing, perhaps somewhere in there, as opposed to what we are. Right now, that's convenient to say that if you're pulling a lot of levers, right, well, then you can see what's working. And let's just say maybe if you don't have as much budget, your ability to do as much, of course, might be limited. And so the answer to this question could be different, but for me, it's doing all of the necessary awareness building and education that is part of a process, as important as of this journey, as then ultimately that prospect walking up to your booth, right, at HIMSS or at Vibe, saying, hey, I'm really interested in a demo. Will you talk to me? Right. And I think what, as Kelly talked about, and some of the things that we've been doing to measure that, goes to show that, without doing all of the work up front, right? Again, this is by the time that person got to your booth and decided that they're going to take time out of their day to seek you out, find your booth in a noisy trade show environment, right? Walk the floor from end to end, wherever you're at in Vegas, to find you. They did their homework, right? The question is were you part of it? And how much did you influence that journey? How much did they consume outside of you or your competition, right? And so to me, right now, I'm much more focused in on the fact that all of these things are really important to ensuring that we are attracting the attention of our buyers. And even though certain tactics cost more, to me, especially, like at a trade show, it's just another step in the buying process. And if we aren't doing the work up front enough, then I think we're going to miss out on a lot of folks that, of course, will never find us, right? And never become aware. And so all of those things today, my headspace is a lot more around, it's going to take all those things today to get customers to be ready to want more information from us when they're ready to buy, right? And we need to be doing all those things as part of our process. And all of that, of course, ends up being attribution on some level, but it's just a step in that sales process.
How about you, Kelly? How about, attribution?
Well, one of the things that we've done is integrate. We use Manbase for our ABM platform, and we use HubSpot for our marketing automation, and they both integrate with Salesforce. And we use Salesforce's quoting tool. I forget the name of it, but so we're kind of like able to track everything through. And from an attribution perspective, here's a good example of when it helps to be able to have that insight. We talked about SDRs, right? And they're like the farm team for your outside salespeople. Ideally, you're going to hire SDRs. They're going to learn cold calling. They're going to follow up. They're going to do outbound as well as inbound sometimes. And then somebody, the CRO says, I think we need to hire a new salesperson to open up a new market or something. And I'm like, okay, well, should we do that? An outside salesperson? Or should we look at hiring 2 more SDRs that focus on targeting more accounts and creating more appointments and opportunities for the outside salespeople we already have? Or so, and I don't have the answer to that question, but the data, the information does. And all of those activities we've done from a marketing perspective, an SDR outreach perspective, and how it ties in helps give you the insight then into what kind of hiring decisions, what kind of expansion decisions make sense, and where should we put more money? Should we do more of these types of events, or because we can show that it flowed through and ultimately created new opportunities with new logos, or with the land and expand strategy, which is another, of course, ABM application. It helped grow, awareness and opportunities within an existing account.
So what I'm taking away from this in terms of attribution is that don't expect ABM is suddenly going to help you find like the silver bullet tactic that you should invest 90% of your budget in, because it's just not going to happen. It's always a combination of multiple factors. It may help you do a couple of things. It may help you, like, for example, the example that you gave, Erik, with content syndication, where it's like it didn't make any difference, didn't move the needle. In fact, if anything, it became a distraction.
We just I agree with him on that too. Yeah.
So that's like, yeah. So, but it also, and I think, Kelly, you made this point too, which is, it's for different playbooks, like a land and expand playbook, you might have a different tactical mix.
Yeah.
And you're never going to know with a great deal of precision, these specific tactics have X percent improvement impacts in terms of uplift. It's just, these are the tactics that work together. Just get over it. But I think you both made this point, which is if sales and marketing are working closely together, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's like what matters is everybody's working closely together, and that you're allocating you're spending the budget and things that make sense. Don't worry about the attribution of individual tactics.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Adam, because certainly what Kelly and I are not talking about is flipping things over the wall, right? And believing that, hey, somebody else is over there to pick up on it, right? We're talking about a high degree of collaboration here, right? That we're fortunate, I think, to have within our organization, to be collaborating that way, as opposed to engineering processes that that takes humans out of the equation, and that's just not realistic, right? And if so, it presents different kinds of challenges, right? And the less likelihood that you're maybe working together on the right things as opposed to focusing in on the wrong things.
That's great. So, closing thought. I want to ask both of you these questions. I'm going to start with you, Erik. So I want you to go back to Erik from the past, Erik pre-ABM, and convince Erik pre-ABM about why you should do ABM.
Yeah, I would say to Erik, in the future, if you will, the result of the work that anybody would do on ABM is going to result in better perfecting a lot of your processes that are really important to your business, right? And especially the orchestration within, between, we just talked about collaboration between sales and marketing, the focus in on priority segments, right? The importance of figuring out content and messaging strategies that you really need to figure out anyway, right? And then an understanding of maybe informing what type of tech do you need to help automate this and bring more intelligence to bear when you're ready. And that's some of the things that I've really learned, through our experience, is that we're able to do a lot with some tools that today we use Sugar, we use Acton, some tools that are kind of secondary in the market, right? But the fact is, it doesn't stop us from being very productive. And that's due to a lot of the other processes that we have in place. So I think that, but there was a time when I felt like, hey, I need to run out and buy the best tool in the market, and we'll start there, right? Because you might feel like you're behind or those kinds of things, right? And the best learning is that we can be very productive moving in that direction, and that when we're ready to hopefully move to a HubSpot and begin to layer on other types of tools, we're going to be really ready to use those on day one. And all of that work has been foundational to get there. And that's the vision that I have for right now through the learnings that we've experienced, certainly on this project and others.
Thank you, Erik. So Kelly, if you go back to Kelly from the past, is it bus or ABM?
Oh, definitely ABM. I don't think I could do the bus now. Well, definitely ABM. We've got a very, we know exactly who our customers are. It's a complicated sale. It takes a while. It's not a small investment. Everything that lends itself to ABM, we just fell right into that, pocket. So it was like, oh my gosh, why wouldn't we do ABM? Some of the lessons that I learned are, it is going to take longer, and we ended up having to bring in an outside consultant. So while I love demand-based, I'm very happy with the platform. We've just actually getting ready to renew our agreement with them. If I had to start over, I might have started with a less sophisticated ABM platform and kind of grown into a more sophisticated platform like demand-based. But, what was it, 4 years ago? There wasn't as many choices as we have today as well. So, and then garbage in, garbage out, make sure what you're importing. We had to do a couple of, scrub and re-imports, which were painful. So really, if I had an hour to do something, I'd spend, 50 minutes planning and 10 minutes executing. Nothing could be more correct with ABM. So
well, thank you both. I've really appreciated hearing your journeys, hearing your stories, and every time I talk to you, I learn something new. Now, for anybody listening to this, if they want to follow up with you or want to follow you, how should they get in touch with you, Kelly, then Erik?
My email address, find me I'm on LinkedIn, Kelly McDermott, and also at Caregility. Just email me, kmcdermott@Caregility. Happy to answer any questions.
Erik?
Yeah, same thing with me. I'm out on LinkedIn. I've got my information available there. Just reach out. Happy to connect.
And it's Erik with a K and no T. Erik Johnson with a K and no T. That's great. Thank you. I'm Adam Chirinas. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Probably already are. I'm Adam at healthlaunchpad.com. Now, if you're interested in learning more about ABM, first of all, click the link. There'll be a link in the show notes to this blog about this podcast. I'm also going to include some blogs that actually Kelly was involved. Kelly actually did this guest post, which she touched on a little bit, which is showing the journey of one particular account, it's a fascinating read. It's really, really worth reading. You can also find a ton of resources on healthlaunchpad.com. We have an ABM resource center. You go to the website, healthlaunchpad.com, click on Learning Center, and in the drop down, there's ABM resources. There is tons of stuff in there. So please go there, help yourself. And if you really want to get started with ABM, give us a call. We work with many clients on that, haven't we, Erik? Yeah. If you enjoyed the show and this was the first show you're listening to, please subscribe. And if you think somebody in your network who might be thinking about ABM, why don't you forward this to them? They might thank you for it. I know I will do. So, Erik, Kelly, thank you again so much for your input today. And thank you to everybody out there for listening. So with that, I will bid everybody farewell.